Marcus Chen stood at the viewport of New Shanghai Station, watching the crystalline ships of the Celestial Court drift into dock. Their organic-looking vessels always reminded him of deep-sea creatures, all translucent surfaces and graceful curves that seemed to defy traditional engineering. 10 years in private security, and the sight still made him pause. Mr. Chen. The voice behind him was distinctly human, belonging to his contact from Interstellar Diplomatic Services. Your credentials have cleared. The client is ready to meet you. Marcus turned from the viewport, straightening his matte black combat suit. The smart fabric adjusted automatically, maintaining the perfect balance between protection and mobility. Lead the way, Ms. Jenkins, though in about 20 minutes, you'll have a much higher security clearance than me. And my name won't matter. She gestured toward a private elevator, her expression carefully neutral. The elevator ride was silent, but Marcus's mind was working overtime. The contract details had been unusually sparse. Protect a high-ranking member of the Celestial Court during their stay in human space. The pay was astronomical, even by his standards, and the security requirements were intense. Something wasn't adding up. The elevator opened directly into a secure suite. 2 human diplomatic security officers stood guard, their augmented combat frames humming softly. But it was the figure by the window that immediately drew Marcus's attention. She was tall, even for one of the Celestial Court, easily 7 feet. Her skin had the characteristic opalescent sheen of her species, shifting between pale blue and violet in the station's artificial light. The formal robes she wore seemed to be made of living crystal, flowing around her like water given form. Lady Zaravine, Jenkins announced, "This is Marcus Chen, the security specialist you requested." The alien diplomat turned, and Marcus felt his combat instincts kick in. There was something wrong with her eyes. They held fear. Members of the Celestial Court were renowned for their emotional control, yet here was one practically radiating anxiety. Mr. Chen, Zeravine's voice was melodious, with the slight harmonic undertone typical of her species. Your reputation precedes you. The incident on Europa Station was particularly impressive. Marcus kept his expression neutral. The Europa Station operation was classified, or should have been. Your sources are well informed, Lady Zaravine. Please, when we are private, Zara will suffice. She dismissed Jenkins with a gentle gesture. Once the human diplomat had left, Zara's posture changed subtly. I suspect you have questions. Several, Marcus admitted, starting with why a member of the Celestial Court needs human security. Your people's defensive capabilities are legendary. Zara moved closer, her crystalline robes catching the light. What if I told you that sometimes the greatest threats come from within? That the legendary Celestial Court has fractures running deep beneath its pristine surface? Marcus felt his suspicions sharpen. I'd say that sounds like the kind of information that gets people killed. Indeed. Zora's smile was bitter. I am officially here as a cultural ambassador, studying human artistic expressions. Unofficially, I carry information that could prevent a war, or start one, depending on who obtains it. And the real reason you hired human security. Because the Celestial Court would never expect one of their own to trust their life to a human. She produced a small crystal, seemingly from thin air. This contains evidence of corruption at the highest levels of the court, conspiracy with certain human factions, weapon developments that violate every treaty between our peoples. Marcus studied the crystal. It looked identical to thousands of decorative pieces worn by the court, which was probably the point. Why me? Europa Station, Zara said simply. You chose to save civilians when ordered to protect valuable military assets. You demonstrated both capability and conscience. I need both. Before Marcus could respond, his combat suit's threat detection system pinged. Multiple armed individuals approaching the suite. The security officers outside had gone silent. How many know you're here? He asked, already moving to secure the room. Officially, 3. Unofficially, she gestured at the door. where heavy footsteps could now be heard. Marcus's combat training kicked in. Behind me. Now. He activated his suit's full combat protocols, the smart fabric hardening into armor plates as nanomaterials coursed through the fibers. I hope you're ready to run. I would not have chosen a human guardian if I feared action, Zora replied, her own form shifting subtly as hidden defenses activated. The door exploded inward in a shower of metal and plastic. Through the smoke came figures in advanced combat gear, a mix of human and celestial core technology. Not official forces then, but well-funded ones. Marcus didn't hesitate. His augmented reflexes kicked in as he launched himself at the first attacker, using their own momentum to throw them into their companions. His combat suit's systems integrated seamlessly with his movements, predicting and enhancing each action. The window, he shouted to Zora. Can you survive a controlled descent? My species evolved from aerial predators, she replied, already moving. Can you? Marcus grinned despite the situation. Human ingenuity. He tapped commands into his suit's control surface, plus some very expensive equipment. The windows shattered outward as they jumped into the neon-lit canyons of New Shanghai Station's external cityscape. As they fell, Marcus caught glimpses of their pursuers, of Zora's crystalline form gliding beside him, of the bustling life of the station continuing unaware below them. This, he thought as his suit's flight systems engaged, was definitely not in the contract. But something told him it was exactly where he needed to be. Zora's voice came through his comm system as they descended through layers of architecture and artificial atmosphere. I should mention, there may be more attempts on my life before we reach our destination. I figured, Marcus replied, adjusting their flight path to avoid a patrol of station security drones. Is this the part where you tell me what's really going on? No, she said, and he could hear something like amusement in her harmonic tones. This is the part where I show you. The lower levels of New Shanghai Station were a maze of maintenance corridors and forgotten infrastructure, far from the gleaming towers above. Marcus and Zora moved swiftly through the shadows, their pursuers' footsteps echoing somewhere behind them. Your evidence, Marcus said as they paused at an intersection, his suit's sensors scanning for threats. What exactly did you discover? Zora's crystalline form seemed to absorb the dim emergency lighting. Have you heard of Project Starbridge? The Joint Human-Celestial Court Initiative, supposed to be about cultural exchange and technological cooperation. A cover. Zora's voice carried an edge of bitterness. The real project involves weaponizing dimensional barriers. Imagine weapons that could seal off entire star systems, cutting them off from faster-than-light travel. Entire populations could be isolated, starved of resources, or worse. Marcus's suit pinged a warning. Movement ahead. He held up a hand, and they pressed themselves against the wall as a maintenance drone hummed past. Who's behind it? A coalition. Members of the Celestial Court who believe we should rule rather than guide. Human military industrialists who dream of controlling trade routes. Together, they plan to. She stopped abruptly, head tilting. Above us. Marcus looked up just as the ceiling panels exploded downward. Combat-suited figures dropped into the corridor, their hybrid weapons already charging. He reacted instantly, his augmented reflexes pushing his body into action before conscious thought. The first attacker fired, but Marcus was already moving. His combat suit's predictive systems had calculated the shot trajectory, shifting him just enough for the energy bolt to miss. He closed the distance, using the confined space to his advantage. In close quarters, his human combat training gave him an edge over opponents used to fighting at range. Zora proved she was far from helpless. Her crystalline robes suddenly hardened into razor-sharp edges, slicing through enemy weapons. She moved with an alien grace, her species' natural abilities complementing her diplomatic training in unexpected ways. This way. Marcus grabbed her arm as soon as they had an opening, pulling her down a side passage. His suit's mapping system was building a real-time model of their surroundings, identifying potential escape routes. They emerged onto a maintenance platform overlooking one of the station's massive cargo bays. Below them, automated systems moved containers with mechanical precision. Above, the bay's ceiling was open to space, protected by shimming force fields that allowed ships to pass through. "They're hurting us," Zara observed, her multifaceted eyes scanning their surroundings. "This platform is too exposed." "Good." Marcus was already accessing his suit's deeper functions, "because we're about to do something very human." "Which is?" "Something incredibly reckless that just might work." He pointed to a cargo shuttle making its way up through the bay. "How do you feel about hitchhiking?" Before Zora could respond, more attackers burst through the doors behind them. Marcus grabbed her hand and ran. The platform shuddered under enemy fire as they sprinted toward the edge. "Trust me," he said, and jumped. They plunged through the cargo bay's artificial atmosphere layers. The cargo shuttle grew larger beneath them, its automated systems unaware of the drama unfolding above. Marcus's suit calculated their trajectory, making micro-adjustments with its flight systems. They landed hard on the shuttle's hull. Marcus's magnetic boots engaged automatically, while Zora's crystalline abilities allowed her to anchor herself to the surface. The shuttle continued its ascent, carrying them toward the force field barrier and space beyond. "Your species," Zara said as they clung to the hull, "has an interesting definition of might work." Marcus grinned behind his helmet. "Wait until you see what I have planned next." He accessed the station's public networks through his suit, searching for a specific type of ship. "How many of your pursuers do you think are authorized for extra-station travel?" Understanding dawned in Zora's alien features. "You intend to leave the station entirely. Best way to change the game is to flip the board." He found what he was looking for, a small merchant vessel preparing for departure. "Besides, I have some contacts who might be interested in your information. People who can help us expose the truth." The cargo shuttle passed through the force field. For a moment, they were in space proper, the vast expanse of stars spreading out around them. Then Marcus's suit detected incoming fire. Their pursuers had acquired ships of their own. "Time to move." He activated his suit's full space maneuvering capabilities. "The merchant ship is docked in Bay 47. We'll have to cross about 200 meters of open space. They will target us the moment we break cover," Zara observed. "That's why we're not going to break cover." Marcus pointed to the stream of cargo containers moving between bays. "We're going to play human pinball." What followed was a masterclass in improvised space warfare. They leaped from container to container, using the massive boxes as shields. Marcus's suit calculated each jump, while Zara's natural abilities allowed her to match his movements with surprising precision. Enemy fire lit up the space around them, but their unorthodox movement pattern made them nearly impossible to target. They bounced between containers, used rotating machinery for momentum, and generally turned the station's cargo system into their personal obstacle course. "Your reputation," Zara called over their comm link as they dodged another barrage, "did not do you justice." "Wait until you meet my contacts," Marcus replied, guiding them toward their target ship. "Ever heard of the Olympus Collective?" Zara's surprise was evident even through the comm. "The Human Deep Space Research Group. The ones who officially don't exist." "Yeah, them." They landed on the hull of their target vessel, and Marcus began bypassing its security. They'd been monitoring both human and celestial court activities for years. "If anyone can help us expose Project Starbridge, it's them." The ship's airlock cycled open just as their pursuers rounded the station's curve. Marcus hustled Zara inside, his suit's systems already connecting to the vessel's controls. "I should warn you," Zara said as the airlock sealed behind them. "Once we leave the station, there will be no turning back. The consequences will probably involve lots of people trying to kill us, political upheaval, and potential interstellar war." Marcus finished, sliding into the pilot's seat. "Yeah, I figured. But sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing. As they undocked, alarms blaring around them, Zura placed a crystalline hand on his shoulder. "You continue to surprise me, Marcus Chen." "Good," he said, punching in coordinates for their first hyperspace jump. "Because where we're going, surprise is going to be our best weapon." The ship's engines flared to life, and they accelerated away from New Shanghai Station, leaving behind the relative safety of human space for the unknown dangers that awaited them in the vast darkness between the stars. The Olympus Collective's base wasn't what Zara had expected. Hidden within an asteroid at the edge of human space, the facility was a testament to human ingenuity. Tunnels and chambers had been carved through the rock with mathematical precision, creating a hidden city of laboratories and living spaces. Marcus guided their stolen ship through a cleverly concealed entrance, the asteroid's defensive systems scanning them thoroughly before allowing passage. "Home sweet home," he muttered, though Zara noticed his hands remained tense on the controls. "At least, it used to be." "You were one of them," Zara said. "It wasn't a question. Before my military service, the Collective recruited me young. They have a knack for finding people who ask the right questions." He brought their ship to rest in a cavernous docking bay. Or the wrong ones, depending on who you ask. Armed figures were already approaching their ship, their weapons not quite pointed at them, but definitely ready. Marcus recognized the leader, Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation, her cybernetic enhancements glinting under the bay's harsh lighting. "You've got some nerve showing up here, Marcus." Sarah's voice crackled through their ship's comm. "After what happened on Europa." "That's why we're here," Marcus replied. "What I found on Europa. This is bigger." He glanced at Zara. "Much bigger." The debriefing room was sparse but comfortable, its walls lined with holographic displays showing data streams that Zara found both familiar and alien. Dr. Chen sat across from them, her cybernetic eyes constantly scanning, analyzing. "Project Starbridge," Sarah said, examining the crystal Zara had provided. "We've detected anomalies in dimensional space that might be related. Testing sites where reality itself seems thin." "The technology was meant to revolutionize travel," Zara explained. "Create stable corridors through space-time. But its weapons potential could reshape the galaxy." Sarah's expression hardened. "Or destroy it. The math suggests the dimensional barriers could become self-sustaining, expanding beyond their initial parameters. They could consume entire sectors of space," Marcus realized. "Not just isolating systems, but erasing them from normal space-time completely." "Precisely." Zara's crystalline form shifted, reflecting her distress. "And the faction within the Celestial Court pushing this project believes such power is necessary to maintain order." Sarah stood, pacing the room. "We've identified several key players on the human side. Military contractors, politicians, even some supposedly legitimate research facilities. But we've never been able to prove the connection to the Celestial Court. Until now." Marcus gestured to the crystal. "That data gives us everything. Names, locations, test sites, and a timeline," Zara added quietly. "They plan to demonstrate the technology within 3 standard days, a contained test that will seal off the Proxima Centauri system." The room fell silent. Proxima Centauri was one of humanity's oldest colonies, home to billions. Sarah's cybernetic eyes wared as she processed the implications. "We can't take this to official channels," she finally said. "The conspiracy runs too deep on both sides. We'd never reach anyone with the authority to stop it in time. Then we stop it ourselves." Marcus's voice carried the same determination Zara had heard when he'd first chosen to help her. "The Collective has resources, ships, equipment, people who can fight and die," Sarah countered. "What you're suggesting is essentially declaring war on both the military-industrial complex and the Celestial Court simultaneously." "No." Zora stood, her crystalline form catching the light in a way that commanded attention. "What we're suggesting is revealing the truth. My people value harmony above all else. If we can expose this conspiracy publicly, prove that it threatens the very fabric of space-time itself. The majority of the court would turn against them. Sarah finished, understanding dawning. And without their alien partners, the human conspirators lose their technological advantage. We'll need proof that can't be denied, Marcus said. Something so public, so undeniable, that no amount of political maneuvering can hide it. Sarah's cybernetic eyes focused on him. You have a plan. The test site. Marcus pulled up a holographic display of the Proxima system. They'll need to calibrate the dimensional technology before the main demonstration. If we can capture that calibration process, broadcast it across all frequencies, along with the data proving who's behind it, Zara added, catching his meaning. The conspiracy would collapse under its own weight. It's suicide, Sarah stated flatly. The test site will be heavily guarded, even if we could get close enough. That's why we need the collective. Marcus stood, his combat suit humming to life. Your best scientists, your most skilled operators, one shot at preventing a war that could tear reality itself apart. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her cybernetic systems processing countless variables. Finally, she smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression. You always did know how to sell a mission, Marcus. She activated a facility-wide comm channel. All senior staff to the war room. Priority Alpha. As alarms began to sound throughout the base, Sarah turned back to them. I hope you both understand. After this, there's no going back. Win or lose, you'll be marked by both our peoples. Zara's crystalline hand found Marcus's, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that bridged their species' differences. We passed that point the moment we chose to act. Besides, Marcus added, squeezing her hand gently, humanity has a saying about moments like this. Sometimes the only way out is through. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. The collective's facilities came alive with activity as plans were made, equipment was prepared, and ships were readied. Scientists pored over Zara's data while tactical teams ran simulations of the upcoming mission. Through it all, Marcus watched the collaboration between humans and their sole celestial court ally with growing hope. If they could work together like this, if they could bridge the gap between their species in pursuit of justice, then maybe, just maybe, they had a chance at stopping what was coming. As they prepared to board their assault ship, Zara pulled him aside. Your people continue to amaze me, she said softly. The way you face impossible odds, the way you refuse to accept defeat. It's not just us, Marcus replied. You chose to stand against your own people for what's right. That takes a different kind of courage. Perhaps, she smiled, her crystalline features catching the light. We're not so different after all. The ship's engines began to power up, their deep hum resonating through the asteroid base. Sarah approached them, now dressed in combat gear of her own. Last chance to back out, she offered, though her tone suggested she knew their answer. Marcus and Zara exchanged a look. In the few days they'd known each other, they'd formed a bond that transcended their species' differences, a shared commitment to preventing a catastrophe that would affect all life in the galaxy. Let's go save reality, Marcus said, and they boarded the ship together, ready to face whatever awaited them, at the edge of known space. The test site hung in the void like a twisted sculpture of metal and energy. Dark matter collectors curved around a central platform, where reality itself seemed to bend and warp. Marcus studied the facility through their ship's stealth sensors, his combat suit's systems already analyzing weak points. Their security is even heavier than we anticipated, Sarah reported, her cybernetic eyes processing data streams. 2 celestial court warships, multiple human military vessels, and enough automated defense platforms to hold off a small fleet. Which is why we're not bringing a fleet, Marcus replied, checking his weapons one final time. One ship, small team, minimal signature. Sometimes the best way past a wall is to find the cracks. Zara stood at the tactical display, her crystalline form reflecting the holographic readouts. The facility's dimensional shielding creates periodic fluctuations in their sensor coverage. If we time our approach correctly, We can slip through during a monitoring gap, Sarah finished, but we'll have less than 30 seconds to reach the maintenance airlock. Marcus turned to their small team, 4 of the collective's best operators, each chosen for specific skills. Once we're inside, we split into 2 teams. Sarah, you and your people head for the control center. Plant the broadcasting package and prepare to transmit everything we find to every communications network in range, while you and Zara go for the primary research lab. Sarah nodded, where they're keeping the prototype. And where we'll find proof of who's really behind all this, Zara added softly. The architects of Project Starbridge won't be able to hide in the shadows any longer. Their ship glided through space on minimal power, riding the edges of sensor shadows. Marcus felt the familiar tension building, not fear, but the heightened awareness that came before action. Beside him, Zora's crystalline form had taken on a harder edge, combat-ready despite her diplomatic training. The facility's security fluctuated exactly as predicted. They slipped through the gap like ghosts, their ship's stealth systems masking their approach until the last possible moment. The maintenance airlock loomed before them, and Marcus's suit connected to its systems, bypassing security protocols he'd studied for hours. They moved through the facility's corridors like shadows, their movements synchronized through hours of practice. Each intersection was cleared methodically, each security camera looped or disabled. It seemed almost too easy until they reached the central junction. Contact, Sarah whispered through their secure comm. Heavy security detail approaching from the north corridor. Marcus signaled the team to hold position, pressing against the walls as footsteps approached. Through his suit's enhanced audio, he could hear fragments of conversation. Final calibration sequence begins in 3 hours. Lord Architect himself is coming to observe. Largest dimensional barrier ever attempted. The patrol passed without incident, but Marcus's mind was racing. The Lord Architect, that's the head of the Celestial Court's Science Division, isn't it? Yes, Zara's voice was tight with tension. And if he's coming here personally? This isn't just a test, Sarah finished. It's a demonstration. They're ready to begin full implementation. The team split up, moving with renewed urgency. Marcus and Zara made their way toward the research lab, while Sarah's team headed for the control center. The facility's layout was complex, designed to confuse intruders, but Zara's knowledge of celestial court architecture proved invaluable. They'd reached the lab's entrance without incident, but Marcus's instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The security was too light, the access too easy. Zara seemed to sense it too, her crystalline form shifting uneasily. The lab doors opened to reveal a vast chamber filled with experimental equipment. At its center stood a device that seemed to defy physics, a framework of impossible angles surrounding a sphere of pure darkness. But it was the figure standing before it that made them both freeze. I must admit, said a voice that seemed to resonate on multiple frequencies at once, I had hoped you would make it this far. The Lord Architect of the Celestial Court turned to face them. His form was unlike anything Marcus had seen before. A being of pure crystal and energy, so advanced that he made Zora look almost human in comparison. The question, the architect continued, is whether you truly understand what you're trying to prevent. We understand enough, Marcus replied, his suit's weapons primed, but not yet raised. You're planning to weaponize dimensional barriers, turn them into tools of control and destruction. Control, yes. Destruction. The architect's form shifted, patterns of light playing through his crystalline body. That depends entirely on your perspective. Tell them, Zaravine. Tell them what you really discovered. Marcus turned to Zara, seeing confusion, and then horror spread across her features. The barriers, she whispered. They're not weapons at all, are they? They're shields. Against what? Marcus demanded, but part of him already knew the answer. The void between galaxies is not empty, the architect said, gesturing to the darkness within the experimental device. There are things out there that make our conflicts seem meaningless. things that have noticed us and are coming. Screens around the lab flickered to life, showing deep space telemetry that made Marcus's blood run cold. Massive objects moving between the stars, defying known physics. Entire systems going dark without explanation. Project Starbridge was never about control, Zara realized. It's about survival. The dimensional barriers aren't meant to isolate systems. They're meant to protect them, the architect finished. To shield them from what's coming. But such technology requires tremendous resources, cooperation between our peoples on an unprecedented scale. And some would resist, would choose destruction over submission to a joint human celestial authority. So you created a conspiracy, Marcus said, understanding dawning. Made it look like a weapon development program to draw out opposition, to identify who would fight against cooperation between our species, and in doing so, identified those who would stand together despite the apparent threat to their own interests. The architect's gaze settled on Marcus and Zara. Like you too. Before either could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Sarah's voice crackled through their comm. Marcus, we've got problems. Multiple ships just dropped out of hyperspace. Military vessels, both human and celestial court. Right on schedule, the architect said calmly. The final players arrived for their demonstration. Now you have a choice to make. Will you help us prevent panic, help us implement the barriers in a controlled manner? Or will you expose everything and risk chaos as both our civilizations face a threat they're not prepared to comprehend? Marcus looked at Zara, seeing his own shock and uncertainty reflected in her crystalline features. The truth was far larger and more terrifying than either had imagined. Their mission to prevent a conspiracy had uncovered something far more profound, a choice that would affect the future of both their species. We need to decide, Zara said softly. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who will be affected by what happens next. Marcus's hand found hers, human flesh meeting living crystal. Together, they faced the architect and the terrible truth he had revealed, knowing their next decision would echo across the stars. Marcus's combat suit hummed with tension as ships continued appearing around the facility. The tactical display showed an unprecedented gathering of forces, human and celestial court vessels taking up strategic positions. Sarah's voice crackled through the comm again, urgent but controlled. Multiple high-ranking officials arriving. Military commanders, government representatives. Marcus, they're here for more than just a demonstration. They're here to witness a choice, the architect said, his crystalline form pulsing with internal light. The moment when our civilizations either stand together or fall separately. Zara stepped forward, her diplomatic training evident in her pose despite the situation. You manipulated us all, created a false conspiracy to identify those who would oppose cooperation, while simultaneously finding those who would fight to protect both our peoples. A necessary deception, the architect replied. We needed to know who could see beyond their own interests, who would risk everything to prevent what they believed was wrong. People like you, people like Marcus. Marcus's tactical mind was racing, processing implications. The attacks, the pursuit, it was all a test. Not all of it, the architect corrected. Some truly did oppose our plans, seeking to maintain the separation between our species. They simply didn't know what they were really fighting against. The experimental device pulsed, its sphere of darkness seeming to grow deeper. Data scrolled across nearby screens, movement in the void between galaxies, patterns that defied natural law. They're coming, Zara whispered, studying the readings. Aren't they? That's why you're rushing the project. Faster than we anticipated. The architect gestured, and a new hologram appeared, a map of nearby galaxies with ominous markers appearing at their edges. We estimate less than a year before first contact. The barriers must be in place before then. Sarah's voice cut through their discussion. Marcus, we still have control of the facility's communication systems. Whatever we decide, we can broadcast it to everyone. No more secrets, no more manipulation. Marcus looked at Zara, seeing the same conflict in her eyes that he felt in his heart. The truth was devastating, but was hiding it worse. Would panic and chaos do more damage than controlled preparation? There's another way, Marcus said finally, an idea forming. You wanted to identify those who would stand together. Then let's show them why they need to. He turned to the architect. Broadcast everything. Not just the threat, but how our peoples came together to face it. Show them Zara and me, a human and a member of the Celestial Court working together. Show them the Olympus Collective, humans and aliens collaborating to uncover the truth. They'll panic, the architect warned. Markets will crash. Governments may fall. Maybe, Zara interjected, understanding dawning in her crystalline features. Or maybe they'll do what our peoples do best. Adapt, innovate, come together in the face of a common threat. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our determination, Marcus added. It's our ability to unite against overwhelming odds. And from what I've seen of the Celestial Court, you have that same capacity. The facility shuddered as more ships arrived. The tactical display showed vessels from every major human faction, every branch of the Celestial Court, all waiting, watching, unknowing witnesses to a moment that would reshape history. Sarah, Marcus commanded, begin the broadcast. Everything we've seen, everything we've learned. No more shadows, no more tests. Are you certain? The architect asked, though his tone suggested he already knew their answer. Zara's hand found Marcus again, crystal meeting flesh in a gesture that symbolized everything they were fighting for. Our peoples are stronger than you give them credit for. Strong enough to face the truth, strong enough to stand together. The facility's communications array came alive, broadcasting on all frequencies, all channels. The truth spread across space like ripples in a pond. The approaching threat, the defensive project, the collaboration between species that had made it possible. And at the heart of it all, a human and a member of the Celestial Court, standing together before the darkness. Their story became a symbol, proof that cooperation wasn't just possible but necessary. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ships that had arrived ready for conflict began coordinating defensive positions. Emergency channels filled with offers of assistance, of resources, of support. Fear was present, yes, but it was overshadowed by something stronger, determination. Well, the architect said, something like approval in his multifaceted voice, it seems I underestimated both our peoples.